in the borough of Manhattan. This is a fantastic district, and it's not because of the buildings or the parks in this district. It is because of the people who live in this district that have called this district home and that have made this district beautiful. Our city is at a pivotal moment, and I am honored that so many of the leaders that are involved in this moment are here today. I'm not going to go through all of them, but all the elected officials that spoke before me, I can't express how moved and embarrassed I was sitting there to hear all of those very kind, overly generous words. So I thank you all very, very deeply for your friendship, for your support, and for the work you did for me during the campaign. And I look forward to now actually getting to the real work and working with all of you to make a difference on behalf of our city and our state. I got involved in politics and activism and ultimately government for one reason: an idealistic hope that I could help people and make a difference in the world. My starting off point was coming out of high school at the age of 16 in a tiny town 30 miles north of Boston in Massachusetts. I had just been elected captain of the football team in my school. I was tremendously lucky and fortunate that I was met with unconditional love and support from my family, from my mother, from my father, from my sister, from my extended family. And it made me realize that everyone should be afforded that type of love and that opportunity. And I wondered, what can I do to help that? It was 2000. It was a year after Matthew Shepard had been tragically murdered in Wyoming. It was years before marriage equality had existed in any state in America. So I left home, traumatizing my mother 4 days after I graduated high school, and I embarked on visiting all across America, city to city. I spoke at colleges and universities, high schools, human rights campaign dinners, conferences, telling my story to give people hope. As Harvey Milk famously said, "You've got to give them hope." After a year of traveling the country, I made my way to New York. I was only coming for an event. The Hedrick Martin Institute on Astor Place, which serves LGBT youth, invited me to their annual dinner. I'd never heard of them, and they wanted to give me one of their annual awards for the public speaking I had done. And I intended to only spend a week here. But a week turned into 2 weeks, and at the end of 2 weeks, I did not want to leave the city. And I guess many people who aren't native New Yorkers, that is a similar story. They fall in love with the energy and people and streets and noisiness of New York. And so I told myself I must get back to New York, and I moved here 6 months later, and the rest is history. We are on the verge of a progressive reckoning in New York City. And this city council has already hit the ground running. We will expand paid sick leave to hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who aren't afforded the dignity of being able to take care of themselves and their family members if they're sick. And we're doing it right away. I aspire to live in a city where 50% of New Yorkers are not living at or near the poverty level, where 62,000 people are not living in the shelter system nightly, 22,000 of whom are children, where hardworking New Yorkers do not have to choose between paying rising rents and nutritious food for their families. After a decade of drastic budget cuts, we must reinvest in things that matter to New Yorkers: public schools, senior centers, libraries, childcare, and that includes universal pre-kindergarten and universal after-school programs. We must immediately fight back against the stem of hospital closures that have affected this city, and especially the west side of Manhattan. As the newly elected chair of the City Council's Health Committee, I look forward to working with all of these other elected officials here today, and the new administration, and many of you, to restore hospital services on the Lower West Side of Manhattan, and to fight against the closures of Interfaith Hospital and Rich in Brooklyn. thank you, former Controller Liz Holtzman, who is joining us. We must address the housing crisis that New York City faces, working to cut our homeless population by prioritizing placement of homeless families in Section 8 units, NYCHA developments, and HPD subsidized housing. We must immediately implement inclusionary zoning, requiring developers to include a percentage of permanent affordable housing in their development plans. And we must reform the governance of the New York City Housing Authority. People who live in NYCHA deserve much more. The people at the Fulton houses and the Elliott Chelsea houses deserve to live in apartments that are not leaking, that do not have mold, and that are places to raise their families and be proud of. And I look forward to working on that in the council. We must continue to preserve and strengthen rent regulations that protect 3 million New Yorkers and press Albany to finally allow New York City to take control of our rent. And we must support supporting housing programs and affordable housing options for people living with HIV and AIDS. I look forward to working with my colleagues in state government, Brad and Deborah and Dick and Linda, a bill that Tom Duane had championed for many years to finally enact the 30% rent cap for people who are living with AIDS in New York City. And Brad has done an extraordinary work. We must invest in real prevention efforts to stop the epidemic. We must enact a comprehensive sexual education program in our schools, and we must continue to fund programs that help people living with HIV and AIDS. Tragically, 3 weeks ago, about 15 blocks north of here, there was a fire, as our borough president mentioned, at the corner of 43rd Street and 10th Avenue in the Strand. It took the life of a promising young playwright named Daniel McClung. He was 27 years old, and he had married the love of his life 6 months earlier. His husband, Michael Cohen, is still recovering at New York Presbyterian Hospital and surrounded by friends and family. I only mention this because these are not the type of things you look forward to dealing with as an elected official. But things happen. I immediately went to work with Michael's family and Daniel's family and their friends, and 2 weeks ago introduced my first piece of legislation in the council to require buildings that are greater than 6 stories in New York to have mandatory public announcement systems in the buildings to let people know whether they should stay or go in an emergency. Daniel, if he had stayed in his apartment, he would still be alive today. But he didn't know. In a fire, you don't know what to do, you just react. If he had good, clear instruction, he would be alive. And Michael would still have the love of his life, and tragically they lost their 2 dogs as well in the fire. The 3rd district, which we are in, is big and diverse. An even bigger and more diverse city, certain tenets prevail. The right to shelter, people being forced out of their homes, the right to earn a decent living wage. Here in this community, we fight the scourge of hunger. In this very room, over 1,000 meals have been served daily since 1982, the year I was born. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank Larry Lippman, the poet laureate for Chelsea. My wife Shirley, who is on my staff and who I adore. I want to recognize Ken Jockers, who is the executive director of the Hudson Guild, who does so much on behalf of our communities and neighborhoods. This district is undergoing rapid growth and change. I became involved and applied to the community board 8.5 years ago when the former mayor came up with a plan to put an Olympic stadium on the west side of Manhattan. And luckily, that did not happen. And it only didn't happen because of activism, community boards, elected officials, block associations, tenant associations, civic organizations, concerned neighbors and residents coming together to fight the plan. And we went through a 7.5-year process, basically, after defeating the West Side Stadium to envision Hudson Yards, which is rapidly rising on the west side. I want to recognize my colleagues that I served with on Community Board 4. 8.5 years on a community board. You don't spend 8.5 years on a community board because it is sexy and full of praise and adulation. You spend 8.5 years on a community board because you care about the community. And so many of the people that I served with fight and work on behalf of these neighborhoods because they truly care. I want to recognize the chair of Manhattan Community Board 2 and my friend David Gruber, who is here. The chair of Manhattan Community Board 4, Christine Mattei, who is here. I'm not sure if the chair of Manhattan Community Board 7, Elizabeth Caputo, is here, and also the chair of Manhattan Community Board 5, Vicky Barbero. These neighborhoods house institutions that serve the entire city. If we speak specifically about the LGBT community, this district is the home to the LGBT Center, which serves people from all 5 boroughs, gay men's health crisis, 80% of whom the clients do not live in the 3rd Council District, the Ellie Forney Center for homeless LGBT youth, and District 3 is the cultural capital of New York City. From Broadway to the art galleries in West Chelsea, to small theaters in the Village, or the Irish repertory in Hell's Kitchen. I want to thank the musicians from Local 802 who have been so wonderful today. I recognize their work as well as Local 1, the stagehands, who light up Broadway and Lincoln Center 6 nights a week for New Yorkers and people visiting our great city. I want to especially thank our fabulous, wonderful MC today, George Kaminsky, who has been unbelievable. Dear friends of me and his husband, John Turner, for their friendship, support, and ability to make me laugh, which is important. Again, I want to thank all the elected officials that were here today. I also want to thank Congressman Jerry Nadler, who has been a role model and hero to me in many ways, and such an advocate for the West Side. As well as Carolyn Maloney, who also represents part of the West Side and supported me. These thank yous are going to take a while, but they're the most important part, so I appreciate you sitting through them. And I just want to say ahead of time, I thank everyone in this room, literally everyone that came here today. And if for some reason, I'm not going to swear, I totally messed up and didn't include your name, don't take it personally. I love you, I'll give you a hug, I'll give you a kiss, but don't hate me if I forget your name. I want to thank Scott Stringer, who came, our controller, Tish James, our public advocate, Brad Hoylman, our state senator, Deborah Glick, our assemblywoman, and Linda Rosenthal, our assemblywoman. I specifically want to thank Dick Godfrey. He was the first elected official to support me. He was very out in the streets of this district of Manhattan. And I want to thank him for doing that 11 months before the election. Our great borough president, Gail Brewer, who I think is a role model to many people who want to be public servants. And of course, the fairy godmother of this district, Tom Delaney. Held this seat from 1991 until 1998 when he was elected to the state senate. He was a trailblazer in the council.